Last video was about the why. This one is about the what. Specifically, what can you actually do to make your game more accessible without a full redesign or a week's worth of extra work? Good news though. Most high-impact accessibility improvements are small. We're talking about an hour or less each. And the ones we're covering today are the most common barriers in small games, which means they're the most likely to affect actual players of your game. We'll look at each category generally first, and then I'll call out specifics about how it applies to what you've already built in Project 2. Text in games is almost always too small, not because developers are careless, but because developers work on larger monitors at close range, and their players often don't. A readable minimum font size for body text in the game UI is around 16 to 18 points at 1080p. Anything smaller, and players with any degree of visual impairment, including the entirely common "I forgot my glasses," will struggle. Use high contrast between text and background, white on dark gray, not white on light gray. Avoid text that moves, flickers, or appears only briefly. Don't rely on text alone to communicate critical information. Pair it with an icon and color cues. In your Project 2, check your health display, your score counter, and any other UI labels you're using. Could you read them clearly on a phone screen? If not, bump the font size up just a little bit and add some contrast. Around 8% of men and about 0.5% of women have some form of color vision deficiency. The most common is red-green, which means red and green look similar or identical. If your health bar is red and your safe zone indicator is green, a meaningful portion of your players won't be able to distinguish between them. The fix is usually not to remove color, it's to add a secondary differentiator. Shape, pattern, label, brightness, contrast, something alongside the color. A red health bar and a green one that also have different shapes or labels works for everybody. Use a tool like Colorblind or Color Contrast Analyzer to check your UI palettes. Avoid red-green as your only differentiator for any meaningful element. A high brightness contrast, light versus dark, that communicates across almost all vision types. In Project 2, take a look at your health indicators and any collectibles you have. Would they still read clearly if you desaturated your game entirely? Try it. Upload a screenshot into Colorblind and see what happens when you convert the grayscale. What disappears and what stays? That's always a good test to make sure that your accessibility is where it needs to be. You just spent a week building audio and visual feedback. Here's the accessibility angle. Neither channel should be the only way a player receives critical information. A player who is deaf or playing with the sound off misses audio cues entirely. A player with low vision or playing in a bright environment misses visual-only cues. The solution from last week, pairing the audio and the visual feedback, is also the accessibility solution. You already did this, so you already have a small win. If damage only triggers a sound, that's an audio-only barrier. If damage only shows a flashing red border, that's a visual-only barrier. Both channels together means both groups of players are covered. In your Project 2, run through your game with the sound muted. Is there anything you need to know communicated only by audio? Now cover part of the screen. Is anything communicated only visually? And then go back and patch those gaps. Full control remapping is a significant implementation effort for a small project, and it's not what I'm asking you to do, but there are smaller alternatives worth considering. Avoid requiring simultaneous button presses for core actions where possible. If your game requires holding one key while pressing another one, see if a toggle version of that action is feasible. Press once to activate, press again to deactivate, instead of holding. That change alone opens the game to players with one hand or reduced dexterity. Avoid keyboard-only controls for anything that works with a mouse or a gamepad. If a mechanic requires precise timing under pressure, consider whether a slightly wider window breaks the challenge or just makes it fairer. In your Project 2, look at your player controller. Is any action a hold and press combination? Is there a single key alternative? This is especially relevant if your game has a sprint, aim, or block mechanic. Games that require extremely fast reactions as a core competency will always exclude some players. Players with slower motor response due to age, disability, or even medication. That's a legitimate design choice for some genres, but it's worth being intentional about when reaction time is the challenge versus when it's just an arbitrary barrier. A patrol enemy that moves at a speed only a fast twitch gamer can dodge isn't necessarily more interesting than the one that moves at a speed most players can react to. The former excludes people, the latter is a fair challenge. Make enemy telegraphing clear. If an attack is coming, the player should have time to see and respond. Consider whether any of your fail states rely purely on speed rather than skill or decision making. In your Project 2, play your game and count how much warning the player has before taking damage. Is there a visual or audio cue that tells you before a hit lands? Your enemy detection radius and attack timing from week 8 are directly relevant here. 5 categories, all achievable in a small project, all with real impact on real players. You don't need to implement all 5. Your assignment this week is to pick one and do it properly. In video 3, we'll look at how to implement a few of these in Godot, specifically exported variables for adjustable values, toggleable options within Audio Manager, and making sure your feedback systems work across both sensory channels.